Hi, I'm Connie Jacob, your host of the Bravely Connected podcast, where we find our inner brave to connect with ourselves, others, and what we dream of for our lives. Get comfy because we're about to dive in to finding our brave connection. Hi, I'm Connie Jacob. Welcome to the Bravely Connected podcast, where every week I show up here to give you tools on how to be bravely connected to the people around you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to not miss one single episode, because I know that when schools are bravely connected, homes are bravely connected, workplaces are bravely connected, and communities are bravely connected, people thrive. Today, I want to give you a very special tool that I came across by accident this week. My own son has been struggling a little bit with some anxiety, and I made him a little workbook with stick figures to help coach him through some of the thoughts that were taking over his mind. And I decided to share it with some people, and they ended up loving it. They're like, Connie, this needs to be published. So I don't know if it needs to be published, but what I did do was I created a free resource for you. If you're a parent, if you're a teacher who has a student, this is a tool to help you coach them. Now, this is specifically for boys. I find as a mom of boys, the approach that I take with them, with anything emotional, is a little bit different than maybe how I would take a girl. So I'm going to walk you through what I created for him and how it can help you help those around you. Now, the whole basis of my work is that attunement rewires the brain. This is nothing new. This is scientifically proven. This is out there. There's lots of information out there on this, but my method is based from that understanding. And so emotion is what we attune to. The behavior, remember, that's just communication of a deeper story. Underneath behavior, there are emotions and there are thoughts. And what I want to do is I want to bring you through how I would coach a young boy, whether they're 8, whether they're 15, doesn't matter, how I would coach a boy through the hard emotion of anxiety, focusing on thoughts. Some people don't want to talk about emotions. It's a barrier for them. It actually becomes frustrating. So this is where we can focus in on those thoughts. And so what I've got here is I'm almost embarrassed. If you're listening on my podcast, have a look on my YouTube. It's on my YouTube, Bravely Connected. It's where you can listen in. You could see my face. This is what I created for you with this young gentleman right here, the battle for your mind. And how this came across is actually a counselor gave this advice once. He said, don't let your mind wander. Wander your mind. What he meant by that is instead of allowing your thoughts to spiral downwards, wander your mind. Be in control of where you're letting your mind go. So when your mind wants to spiral downwards, instead of allowing it to do that, start using your imagination to wander your mind in a different direction. Because sometimes what happens to youth, to kids, but to be honest, even to us as the adults, when anxiety attacks come on, it's like we cannot control our mind from spiraling downwards. It sends us into panic. It sends us into paralysis. It sends us into just feeling frozen. And that's when we wander our mind. And so that's the concept that I took with this book, that your mind is under battle. Now, boys, I don't know about your boys, but my boys love video games. It's the conquering, right? It's the defeating the bad guy. And so I took the concept of the battle and now have given them tools on how they can overcome the battle of their mind. So this first page here, and if you want this free resource, all you have to do is go in the show notes, click the link, and just say, send me this resource. Now, could I charge money for this? Maybe, but I'm choosing not to for now because this is just a resource that came to me. People have been finding it useful, and I just want to help. And so this first page is talking about how just like the good guy in your video games has a bad guy to defeat, there's bad guys that are trying to defeat you in your mind. And so what we're doing in this first page is we're identifying what are those bad guys saying. So they could be saying things like, you can't do this. They could be saying things like, you suck. Why are you even trying? They could say, we rule you. You don't rule us. And so what we're doing is we're getting the person to identify what are those thoughts. Now, if you know my Bravely Connected method, the attune in, attune out, you know that this is the one step on identifying thoughts, identifying the sentences in our minds. These are toxic thoughts that are ruminating, that are dictating the way we see the world. So we're naming them here. Then I've got this little circle here to identify, how are you doing? Now, again, boys don't like to ruminate here very long. They don't want to think about these things too much. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your health doing? Just 10 is amazing, 1 is awful. How are my friendships? How's school? My family? Are you experiencing feelings of joy? Are you experiencing feelings of hope? What about feelings of purpose or feelings like I matter? This is going to give you a picture of what's underneath, because they might look at a question like this and go, I don't know. Isn't that usually the answer we first get? I don't know. It's like, well, are you feeling connected to your friends? Yeah. So would you say that's about an 8? Or is it amazing, like a 10? You're helping them. You see, a lot of times what's happening to young people when they're experiencing anxiety, it's like a tornado is going on in our mind. And until we know and we've made sense of the stories that these thoughts are creating, the perspectives that they're creating, they own us, we don't own them. And so we need to help these young people. And sometimes we need help for somebody else to pull out the story. What's really going on? So what we need is we need a battle plan. We need a battle plan, just like on their video games, they're not going to just go in and defeat Bowser or defeat the dragon with no plan. And oftentimes we learn through having to try and defeat. Oh, that didn't work. I'm going to go back and try that again. We need a battle plan. And so it's reminding all of us that anxiety, it doesn't have to have the final say, but we need a battle plan. And that a lot of times these toxic thoughts, they can be defeated. They can be identified. We don't have to stay where we are. So I remember being an assembly speaker for many years, youth mental health assemblies, and I would always have a young person come up to me afterwards and say, no, 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 you don't understand. I am anxious. And I always found it very interesting how they very much wanted to take on the identity of anxiety. But anxiety is not an identity. Anxiety is an emotion, and it's a part of you. It's not all of you. Even if there's a clinical diagnosis of anxiety, it's not all of you. It's a part of you. And what you're experiencing is real and legit, but it is not your whole story. And so what we're doing here is we're reminding the person that this is not all of them. There's more to you. So what brings you joy? What creates our identity is our experiences, our emotions, our thoughts, our behaviors, our perceptions, our stories, but also what brings us joy. That creates who we are on the inside. So getting the identification of that, what brings me joy, is reminding me, oh yeah, I'm so much more than just my deficit. I'm so much more than just what I think I lack. What do you like doing? These are keys for us as the adults who are listening to the story going, I say I like basketball. Well, let's dig into that a little bit. If they write down basketball, don't just watch them write these things down. Ask them lots of questions about that. When did you discover you loved basketball? Where were you? What was the situation going on around you? Because now what we're doing is we're pulling out story. There is so much inside of us that's good, that's strong, that has strength to it. But we don't talk about those things in mental health. We don't talk about the resilience and the grit. No, we talk about, oh, I've been feeling like heavy and anxious and overwhelmed and avoiding, and it can just feel so overwhelming. No wonder no one really wants to talk about it, because we leave feeling heavy. This might be the most powerful page in the book. This one is, here's what I see in you. What you're going to do on this page is you're going to write down, here's what I see in you. This might be something that they will hold on to for the rest of their lives. I have people who have told me, Connie, you wrote me a note years ago. I still have that. I still have encouraging notes that people wrote me years ago, because encouragement is the strength of life. It gives courage. And so this is a very important part for them to know what you see in them. This page here is honestly something that is so good when it comes to creating agency. Yes, there's a lot of things that are out of our control, which is usually sometimes where anxiety, the feeling of anxiety might come from, is all the things that are out of our control. And so what we're going to do is we're going to list them on this sheet. I am in control of, and I am not in control of this. We're going to list them out. There is something about writing these out. Speaking it out does one thing, but writing it out does something even greater. Neurologically, it clicks. Now, what we're going to do with the things that we cannot control is we are going to write down, how am I going to cope with that? So now we're creating a battle plan in advance. The time not to do this with a young person, or with anyone for that matter, is when they're in the midst of their anxiety. This is not when we work on strategies like this. It's not when we fill out what are the voices saying. We do this workbook when we are calm. When they're in it, you just say, I'm here. I've got you. What do you need? You just be there for them. But when they come down, when they're out of the back of their brain, when they're out of their limbic system, we're back to the prefrontal cortex. It's the next day. You sit down with them when they're in their so-called right mind, and you work through this. And then it helps them organize their brain. And we're just about to get into some battle strategies. But for them to know what they're in control of, here's what I'm going to do. Here's my action plan for what I'm in control of. So for example, I did this with my youngest son because he has been experiencing some anxiety, but he was playing like games before bed. Like, he goes to bed at a good hour, but the games that he was playing before he went to bed were actually stirring up anxious thoughts. And so one of the things that he came up with, not me, I was just there to guide, was he was thinking, I need to actually maybe watch a funny show and then calm down for bed. Well, that was his idea. And guess what? Things have been better. But that was by identifying what we can control. So no, we can't control what happens sometimes at school, how other people will act, how much homework he gets, but we can control what we watch before bed. Those are things that within my control, and they will identify those, which will make them feel like they have some kind of agency over their life. The things that they can't control, like how much homework they're getting or the reactions of others, here's how we're going to cope with that. We are pre-planning how we're going to respond rather than react in those moments. This is a battle plan against anxious thoughts that rise up when we feel out of control. Now we have a plan. This one went over so well. This one is sword weapons. Now, for those of you who don't like weapons, I'll never forget going to this garage sale with my youngest son. I think he was maybe 10. And they were selling this huge sword. And he's like, Mom, I want that sword. Like, and if I was a little boy, to be honest, I would have wanted the sword. It was so incredibly cool. But I'm like, there's no way on earth I am bringing that sword home, because if you and your brother ever get into an argument, I would never want to see that sword in use. Do you know what I'm saying? All the moms know what I'm talking about. The dads are like, no, man, get him the sword. But for this, we're talking about, if you don't like swords, if you don't like weapons, okay, it's how are you going to protect yourself? I think we need to remind ourselves and these young people that we can take preventative measures to protect ourselves against anxiety. And so that's what we're going to identify here. So just like in a video game, you don't go and slay the dragon with nothing. What are the weak spots in anxiety and how am I protecting myself? What are the internal resources that you have? Internal resources, things like joy, things like laughter, things like creativity and hope, things like resilience, the ability to push through when things are hard. A lot of times we think, oh, it's going to be reading this article or watching this YouTube video, but mental health tools, mental health strategies are caught. They're not taught. And sometimes reminding our young people and the people around us of what they have inside of them, that becomes the battle strategy. For me, when we were in the midst of our mental health crisis in our home, my battle strategy was this statement: I am brave. I show up when it's hard. I love without walls. I forgive when it hurts, and I'm going to keep rising through the storm. These weren't just affirmations that I said over myself. This was me calling out the strength, the internal resources inside of me. The next one is shield weapons. Now, again, if you don't like weapons, how are you going to defend yourself? How are you going to shield yourself? And so the questions here are your friendships helping or are they harming? Friendships, the relationships of our lives, do we feel protected and surrounded and held? And if not, what can we do about those things? What are you watching and listening to? Is it creating a sense of ease in your life or is it creating a sense of anxiety? I noticed if I go on TikTok, this is just me, I'm a Gen Xer. TikTok, that actually creates anxiety. I literally feel my brain scattered afterwards, and I feel like I've had 10 cups of coffee. I got off TikTok. My life is great now. Being able to examine these things. And what story are you telling yourself? What story are you telling yourself about yourself, and where are these stories coming from? And then I want to share with you a question that I've asked many people, including my boys and including myself. Is who do you have the courage to become? I asked that to a group of teachers once, and I had one teacher get a little bit upset. She goes, that sounds like pressure. I'm like, if it sounds like pressure, then leave that question alone, because that question is not meant to sound like pressure, but it is meant to be a defensive shield strategy to anxiety of I get to choose who I become. I don't have to listen to anxiety's voice that tells me that I should sit down, that I should hide, that I should be isolated, that people can't be trusted. When I think about who I want to become, I want to be someone who is connected to other people. I want to feel a sense of community. I want to belong. I want to be someone who creates belonging. And in order to be that person, I need these battle strategies. And actually, in a short little bit here, I'm not going to release it yet, but I'm going to be giving a 45-day belonging challenge. And if you're somebody who wants to create belonging, or you want to experience more belonging in your life, watch out for that challenge because it's coming really soon. I wanted to identify places in our day when I can be either on the offense or the defense. And so the 2 times of day that I notice anxiety likes to show its ugly little face, it shows itself all the time. But I've noticed is that before bed and when I wake up, those 2 times, if I can have a preconceived plan so that I've got my sword and my shield out before I go to bed and when I wake up, then throughout the day, I find that it lessens, the voices lessen, anxiety lessens. And so here's the question. What can you do before bed to ease your anxiety? And this is where my youngest son said, I need to watch comedy. I need to watch something lighthearted and not play intense games. Smart young man. It has made all the difference. What can you do in the morning? So here's another fun little suggestion is write yourself a quick note like, I can do this, or I'm going to feel so good if I push through today. And Write it the night before so that when in the morning, if you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed, you look at that sheet of paper when you wake up. The other things that have been written down on this question, what can you do in the morning, is literally just get out of bed. Just get out of bed, do the next right thing. Okay, hop in the shower, get the cup of coffee, just get to the kitchen table. Step by step, baby steps. And this last question is, what do you want to say to these thoughts that want to rule you? This is where we're identifying that no, 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 I'm in charge here, not you. Now, does it mean that you will never feel anxious, that this student or your child or your teammate will never feel anxious? No, it doesn't mean that at all. But what do you want to say to it? What do you want to say to anxiety? And I want to ask you, the listener, that question today. What do you want to say to anxiety? I always have this little voice in my ear that says, just sit down and shut up. Nobody wants to hear from you. I always have that little voice in my head. And that creates anxious thoughts, spiraling thoughts that say, oh, yeah, maybe I should sit down. Now I've got anxiety about coming onto the podcast or speaking in front of people because I'm worried about what people are thinking. Are they thinking that? So what I would say to anxiety in that moment is, that kid in the corner in that school that I'm going to speak at right now is more important to me than your voice. The person who's listening to this podcast right now, who needed to hear this, that without me coming on here and sharing this important tool, they'd be lost. They would be feeling like they don't know what to do. They're more important to me than your voice, anxiety. And when I make a difference in other people's lives, I feel so alive. So you, anxiety, just sit down, you sit down, and you shut up. That's what I want to say to anxiety. And so I hope that this has been helpful for you. I'm so excited to give you this again. If you want this free tool, please just click on the show note link. It'll send you right there. Just say, send me the resource. I will send this resource to you. I want to invite you because I'm doing a free webinar called How to Work with Students with ODD, ADHD, Anxiety, and Depression. I'm doing this on November 12th. I'm doing it for free. If you want to come, that link is in the show notes as well. One more quick announcement. This is kind of a big deal for me. This week, I turned 50 years old. Woo! 50 years old. And what I'm doing for my 50th birthday is I am dance battling 50 people to raise money for mental health and belonging strategies in schools because I'm starting for my birthday, drum roll please, I am starting my very own Bravely Connected Foundation. What? Whoop, whoop, whoop. I'm so excited. I'm giving myself more work for my birthday, but I'm super excited because the last 25 years has been amazing and I have loved every moment of it. But now it's halftime in my life and I want to spend the next 25 years of my working life, I guess if I'm going to 75, I want to give something back. I want to give what I have. I want to be generous. I don't want finances to be a barrier for schools. And so I've also put that link in the show notes. If you're in Calgary, if you're in my city, you want to come to my birthday party, it's this Wednesday night. It's November 6th, 6 to 8:30. You can be a part of this event. It's going to be so fun. I'll put that link in the show notes too. But I just want to say to every single one of you who's been following me, journeying with me, listening to me, having me into your school or your workplace, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. It's been such a ride, and I can't wait for the next chapter. I will see you next week when I am 1 year older. Keep being brave.